Good morning, welcome. My standard health warnings about anything I ever say. My opinions are not always terribly popular. The very nice introduction, thank you. I've been described as a whole bunch of different things in the kids industry. I was speaking at something last year and someone described me as a mix between the Pied Piper, Don Draper, and Willy Wonka. I think it's kind of all pretty accurate, actually. But I guess just on who I really am. I came from the video games industry originally. Built a couple of companies there, Demonware and Jolt Online. You might know them. They were acquired by some other bigger companies, Activision and GameStop. So I have a weird background in console, social, and bizarrely retail gaming. On a personal level, I'm an investor in somewhere between half a dozen and 10 startups. Pretty focused on the digital media around kids space. So investments in Super Awesome, obviously. But things like Makeys, 3D printing, some online games. And I also sit on the board of Brown Bag Films, who are a big animation studio. We make a lot of some of the biggest preschool TV programs in the world. I guess quick plug for my day job, which is with Super Awesome. We do kids-safe advertising. So we've built out a platform. We work with most of the major brands to make sure you've got a safe advertising revenue stream in your game or website. We do it very, very well. Talk to us. I'm going to talk a little bit about really the kids industry and my two perspectives that I see it from, both as an operator or builder of companies, but also as an investor, because it's a weird two hats, both sides of the table kind of thing. We started Super Awesome about 2 years ago. And when I was explaining to my friends what we were going to do, is like, we're going to go and build a company and we're going to do it in the kid space. And to say that their initial reaction was not totally supportive would be reasonable description. This is essentially what the kids industry looks like today. I mean, it is difficult. It's a tough place. We got a fragmented audience. Kids are on so many platforms, as you all know. Much harder to communicate with them, to market to them, to engage with them than it was 5 years ago. I hate to be saying it publicly, but you know what? TV was much easier. For all the developers who are here, you know this better than anyone. Monetization is super hard. If you are a kids developer, you work hard for your money, and I certainly know that. And thirdly, compliance is becoming a bigger and bigger and bigger issue. And you all know about COPPA. In about 12 months' time, by the end of this year, you're going to know about the European equivalent, which is going to be rolling out. Compliance. To kind of look at these and look at the problems in the kid space, and I went, yeah, okay, yeah, we still think we can solve this, and I went back and I said to my friends, who are all investors and founders and things like that, I said, no, it's cool, we can do this, and they listened to my arguments and they listened to my explanation, and they pretty much still reacted that way anyway. So I guess this is going to be a pretty short walk through some of the things I'm seeing across the landscape. I guess this is very much with my Super Awesome hat on, and because we work with both developers on one side and all the pretty privileged position where we hear what everyone is saying and we actually see what everyone is doing, and sometimes those things are different. Probably the single biggest trend that you started to see towards the end of last year that you're going to see in buckets this year. Silicon Valley has discovered that kids exist. So, you are now seeing head of kids positions. Get to about 2, and all of a sudden the parents go, holy shit, these kids are doing things that we didn't do. We really need to think about this for our business. And you're seeing a wave of this happening across Silicon Valley right now. This is going to get bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger over the course of this year. So keep an eye on it. It's really important for our industry because that's pretty much where all the money is. Second thing, I've thrown this slide out a number of times. I'm something of a rap fan. Content discovery is still sadly broken for kids. I get pitches from startup game developers every other week, and they all think that they can build their company on the App Store, on Play, very, very easily. And I try and explain to them that these app stores are really not content platforms, they're monetization platforms. So far, the best content discovery platform that we've seen is still YouTube. If you talk to parents, one of the biggest problems parents will tell you when they're describing their kids' behavior on YouTube is that they keep clicking on new things, new videos to go and see, right? I need to stop that, right? That is not something you always hear about on the App Store side. So YouTube is probably too good at leading kids into new content. The app stores are not quite there yet. I don't know how that's going to change in the short term. I'll talk a little bit about this later on, but certainly when startups say, hey, we want to build a game, I say, well, think about looking at the really niche platforms first. Actually, don't go where everyone else is. And I do think that is the future. Who's a developer in the room? Hands up. Most of y'all? Yeah, this. You know this. I know you know this. We built Super Awesome to try and start fixing this, so hopefully we're helping. I've seen some percentages in terms of what monetization looks like in kids category versus every other category, and it's brutal. So on the positive side, it can only get better, right? And I think it's going to have to get better because every conversation we've had with all the platform holders, they're really getting concerned about this. And if they're so I think this is going to slowly start changing. Does anyone not know about COPPA? Just out of curiosity. Does that acronym not mean anything to anyone in the room? Amazing. Okay, cool. The equivalent is called? Hands up. Cool. You're not allowed to answer. Neither is Josh at the front. Yeah, this is going to get bigger and bigger and bigger. I would say the single biggest, from an awareness point of view within advertisers, within developers, within publishers, everyone thinks that legislation like COPPA around kids' data privacy is just going to stay roughly where it is right now, right? That's bollocks. It's going to get bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger, and no one has really grasped this yet. And even all the folks I'm speaking to over in Silicon Valley, they think, oh yeah, you've got this quirky sort of privacy thing. It's like, no, it's getting bigger and bigger and bigger. So in California on the 1st of January, there was a new right to be forgotten piece of legislation that went into effect, which is, it's for teenagers, basically students. So it's the same right to be forgotten that's being enacted in Europe right now. So that's bringing similar data privacy up to the age of 18, above 13. So this is going to define a lot of what technology is for the next 5 or 10 years, and no one's talking about it enough. So actually everyone in the kids industry, you guys are significantly ahead of thinking on this than most other companies or sectors. Back to my point on monetization, and you all I said monetization was going to increase, and I saw some of the heads in the audience going, yeah, heard that before. So the advertising spend in the kids space is the most weirdly out of sync thing that you can ever see. So that's a chart up there of spend. TV is in green, online is in that rather fetching lilac color. And these are the different age groups from older to younger on the left. Online digital mobile display advertising in the kids sector is roughly 10% of what it should be. That is starting to change. So we are now seeing all of our advertising clients really bump up the ratio of their digital spend to TV spend. So everyone's been talking about this for 3 or 4 or 5 years, but now the TV impressions for kids are dropping so much, this is changing. And we've seen 100% increases in digital advertising budget from a lot of our clients this year. In some cases, it's been more than that. So you are slowly going to see more advertising money flowing into the kids space in a good and wholesome way, and as much of it through us as possible. But this is absolutely changing. And this is kind of a watershed. Because there hasn't been a huge amount of investment in this space, most of the other sectors, the growth in online spending has been driven by lots and lots of startups, fueled by lots and lots of VC capital, pulling these advertisers, onto the digital side. That hasn't really happened in the kids space, right? So what it is a push mechanic, and it is being pushed because there is simply less and less TV impressions that are available. So it's forcing companies to spend whether they like it or not. So this is going to be interesting. This is going to increase, and that's pretty much what I just said. And I think it's one of the realizations. You get markets that are a little bit old school, and they tend to just not move in their opinions, and then all of a sudden they realize, oh shit, this thing is actually happening, and then they try and do everything all at once. That's very much what's happening in the kid space right now. This is a quote from George over in Fullscreen, and it's one of my favorite quotes of all time, because a lot of the more mainstream advertisers, a lot of the TV companies are kind of going, oh Jesus, this is like MTV all over again. Now everything's gone to YouTube. Kids are everywhere. Please come back. Here, have my money. This is a conversation, or this is a phrase that is being uttered in an awful lot of boardrooms right now, and they're going to want to talk to you guys about where kids have gone. So that's kind of my view from a company builder perspective, if I can be so bold as to call myself that. I think there's members of my team who would describe me in other ways. And I spend most of my time building companies, but I'm also weirdly a venture partner in a VC fund in London called Hoxton Ventures. And we're a smallish fund. We're about a $35 million fund, and we invest in early stage tech and internet companies. So we see a lot of inbound stuff from all the startups. We see a lot of stuff from video games. I kind of get all the kids stuff as well. So we see a lot of different trends that are going on. So I wanted to give you like 5 or 6 perspectives on the landscape from that perspective, which is kind of more macro and less sort of coalface. And also I've got, Super Awesome also has like a research team, because we have so much behavioral data and trend data that we actually do research reports. So there's a few slides in here just to give you sort of a data sense on what's going on. This, I know you all know this, but a lot of people don't really talk about the numbers. The growth in child ownership of tablets is absolutely rocketing. That's different to a tablet being in a household. So what's happening is that as hardware refreshes come out, the tablets are handed down. So there is this entire generation that are actually owning tablets, which is going to sort of create some sort of subtle effect in the market as kids get older. The single biggest question I hear all the time is, where is all the venture capital money that should be going into this space? So when you're building a startup, those of you who've built startups before, you'll often go and pitch VCs because you want to raise money to expand. And if you are building a non-content company in particular in the kid space and you go and pitch a VC, they'll say, well, we haven't really seen big companies emerge from the kid space that aren't content companies. So we get what you're doing, but we're going to wait until we see the successes, and then we'll start to invest. So you have this weird situation where does anyone know that rapper? That's Rick Ross. Okay, we'll do the rap education lecture another time, but anyway, he's not actually a VC, he's a rapper. So you have this weird situation in the kid space, and this is really interesting because this is actually a structural issue where there's lots and lots of content activity. So this is a slide that we have from our partner deck, and it shows the general kids industry, TV to the left, digital to the right, advertising business model on top, and content business model below. If you look at the TV side, just for a sec, everything is very consolidated. So all the big names are there. They make their money from a combination of content and advertising. If you look over on the digital side of the map, most of the activity and most of the investment has gone into digital content. So we have this weird situation where for any normal industry, you'll have a lot of investment that's gone into infrastructure, services, basically all the non-content stuff that helps support the growth and monetization of content. We actually don't really have that in our industry because there hasn't been much VC. It's kind of a chicken-egg sort of thing. So you got like this just happens to be the advertising space. It's one of the reasons we're probably growing so fast. There's other opportunities in there around payment, around privacy, around verification, things like that. But we have a weird industry. If this was any other sector in the world, there would be like 10 companies like Super Awesome. There aren't. And that's strange and unusual from an investor perspective. Oh, Jesus. people need to stop saying this. Oh, like, they either say, we'll get featured as a launch strategy, or we know someone in Apple/Google. I'm like, come on, great, that's week one. What's week two and week three? The evolution of marketing for startups on mobile and tablet has to happen. It's not happening fast enough, which means two things, or one of two things, or maybe both. Either new platforms will emerge that will draw startups, or more startups are going to die. It's one or the other. Because there's so much content there that just being featured, as you all know, isn't enough. But I still hear it all the time, and there's not enough awareness of this. Part of the problem, and this is some data from late last year on the percentage of kids looking at different screens, is there's loads of content, obviously, but there is more distraction than there ever has been. You know, roughly about 1 in 8 kids are looking at, you know, 3 screens when they're doing stuff. You know, so it's probably TV, probably tablet, and either mobile or laptop as well. There's a huge amount of distraction out there. So it's you know, if you're pitching investors and you are a content developer, you really have to have a pretty compelling answer as to how you are going to both get and retain your audience. This is super tough. Because a lot of people go to VCs and they pitch the VCs and they go, oh, VC liked it, you know, investor liked it, he was smiling, he was like, oh, my kids want to play it, etc. And then he said, no, I'm not going to invest. You know, and part of the reason is there's these problems, these challenges that have to be solved for your company. I mentioned this before in the other side, but it really is worth hammering home. We are a lot of senior execs from all the internet companies who are now trying to have conversations with people in the kids space, asking about what's going on, you know, what are kids looking at, how are they engaging, what does good UX look like for kids, and this is going to have ramifications. It's going to have knock-on effects. I think they're going to be mostly positive, but we don't know yet. It's early. It is a trend that is definitely happening. There's a few reasons for this above and beyond my rather flippant comment about senior execs suddenly having kids and realizing that kids exist, although you'd be surprised how often that drives strategy. You know, kids have access to more money than people think. So this is some data also from Super Awesome about weekly allowance. You know, and it's roughly around that sort of £6 mark. Girls claim to get less allowance than boys for whatever reason. But the actual, the most interesting piece is at the very, very bottom, that the parental spend is about 8 times greater per kid per week than their allowance. You know, and all of a sudden, if you are a company that owns a platform, you know, and you're trying to figure out where the next cohort of users is going to come from, and you're starting to realize just how much spending kids control, and you equally realize that those same kids are not going to be in your next cohort of user signups, that starts to get worrying. Here's another great example. To be honest, I could probably have changed that slide to just say Frozen. That number for Frozen is out of date. Frozen is pretty much the biggest movie of all time ever, you know, and for the next 500 years, as far as Disney are concerned. It has been huge, and you know, something like 8 or 9 of the top 20 movies in the last 2 years on a grossing basis have been kids' movies. So even though obviously kids have something of a direct limit in their spending, they control huge, huge amounts. And everyone is starting to wake up to the fact that, shit, we need to be engaging with kids in some sort of way, or we need to be giving them a path so that as they get older, they're actually still interested in our platform and services. Yeah, YouTube. So YouTube is obviously huge. YouTube is probably the single best acquisition that has ever happened in terms of what Google paid for it and what it's now worth. As far as I can tell, it's pretty much worth 2.5 Europes, 5 Switzerlands, I don't know. You know, kids accept, this is all Super Awesome data, kids accept YouTube is the future of TV. You know, they think that at least, or they think that it's twice more likely than Netflix to be the future of TV, which is interesting. They pretty much all use it for everything. I'm sure you all know that YouTube is the single biggest source of music for kids under the age of 15. Like, it dwarfs Spotify. You know, and you think that, you know, how relatively underdeveloped YouTube still is as a platform. You know, that thing is just going to be a monster if they can actually hold on to their kids' audience. However, here's the challenge. My second last slide, maybe three. The bigger you get on any given platform, and I think this is true for almost all platforms, the more you as a developer and content owner want to go and move to a different platform, because you don't want to be giving 30% or 45% of your revenue away. So we're now at the point where we're seeing maturity across YouTube, across a lot of the app stores, and the big companies are trying to leave because they're leaving so much money on the table to the platform owners. And I think we're going to eventually start seeing a dedicated platform for kids that is completely separate and completely discrete. But all of these things will start on YouTube. They will start with the App Store. You're seeing a lot of the games publishers starting to have their own content built into games. You're going to see more and more of that. Final section. The last thing just to point out, and again, this is something that we see a lot. This generation of kids is very, very, very different from anyone that we've seen before. Everyone has seen kids grow up and do the thing. We were all kids once, probably most of us. And this is the first generation of kids that have had access to all of the data from day one. They've had access to all of the technology from day one. They have a different approach to problem solving. When most of us in this room were growing up, if there was a problem, you know, in terms of a problem of knowledge, it was a question of, well, can we find that information? Kids today are growing up with access to all the information. It's not, can I find it? It's, do I have the time to find it? They know that a problem can be solved. And this is going to lead to a much more, I think, creative generation than we've seen before. These are some stats on kids under the age of 14 who have, you know, basically tinkered with their own programming. So you're looking at about a quarter of kids who have written some code or done something at least vaguely technical. Intriguingly, it's one of the few sectors in the toy industry related to this that's growing. Construction is one of the few sectors that's growing. And when you ask kids, you know, why they play Minecraft, you know, you can see from the word cloud, there's one very, very clear trend there. So we're going to see, keep an eye on kids and what they're doing and how you're engaging with them. You'll find that the more tools that you can build for them and the more you allow them to interact and react rather than putting them on a set of rails in your games and apps, the more they will respond to that. Right, I'm done. Thank you very much for listening. I hope some of that was interesting. I'm sure you knew a bunch of it. Hit me up on Twitter, email, and if you've got any questions, I can talk about them now, I think. Can I? Yes, cool, awesome, thank you. Excellent.
I have one.
Ah.
You can't go. Stay there.
Okay.
So you said to me that Silicon Valley has now discovered kids, and the generation of kids is different from any other generation come before. What does that mean for the kids gaming industry? Is this like a meteor?
Oh, very good question. Very good question. Does that mean we're all dinosaurs? I don't know.
Yeah.
I think it means a couple of different things. I think people are realizing there's basically a confluence of trends that are happening. So as the big companies are recognizing that kids are a discrete audience that have to be built for specifically, you're also seeing the legislation coming in and saying, okay, well that's fine, but if you're building technology and interacting with kids, you've got to do it in a certain way in terms of not gathering data and all the various other restrictions. So you're going to see that essentially that there's going to be a new infrastructure that's required for kids, kid-safe infrastructure. And I mean that at a very data gathering level all the way up to how kids sign up to various things. You know, so I think in terms of games and content, kids' content in general has been better funded than a lot of other things. So I think people are going to be looking at that, but I think you're going to see a lot more emphasis and investigation around the actual platforms, the technology, the tools, almost everything that goes around the content to support this, because people are realizing if you facilitate this, you could have something similar to the actual, the mainstream video games industry when it exploded 10 years ago. So I think if you're in the kid space right now, it's super interesting, but I'd be looking beyond content.
All right, now we have a microphone, so you don't have to shout. Are there any other questions?
Great. Easy, nice. I like when people listen and don't ask questions. We should do this more often. Cool. All right.
Okay. All right, well, thank you very
Thanks,
much.
guys.